Want to welcome everyone to this week's session of Bahai.chat. We're so delighted to have you here. Bahai.chat is a conversation series dedicated to our interconnectedness. It's an uplifting moment when we can turn our thoughts to spiritual ideas. Each weekly session is rooted in the Baha'i writings and the fundamental teachings of the oneness of God, the oneness of religion, and the oneness of humanity. In these sessions, we hear from people who really put these principles into action. Core to the Baha'i Faith is the idea of independent investigation of the truth. And this means that nobody's faith should be conditioned on anything other than that individual's search for and understanding of truth. And so through Bahai.chat, we aim to explore truth at the deepest level, that of spiritual reality. I want to remind everybody that we are also live streaming right now on Facebook. So if you go over to the Bahai.chat Facebook page, you can share the live stream with your friends. You can find that, that'll be saved and on the Facebook page if you want to, if you love the chat and you want to show it to people after we're finished here today. And also as a reminder, we are going to be concluding with some Q&A with our guest speaker this week. And if you are joining us on Zoom, you can send in questions through the Q&A function. And if you're on Facebook, you can write a comment to ask a question to our guest speaker, Eric. And for now, I'm going to turn it over to our Bahai.chat executive producer, David, for some more remarks.
Thank you so much, Anissa. I've thought a great deal about today's program, especially with regards to the horrific killing of George Floyd in Minneapolis and the recent upheavals across America, driven by such manifest injustices that have existed in this country since the days of its inception, again exploding now in real time on every device through every social media portal, so that all of us may be forced to bear witness. As a white man enjoying the privileges that we have and that we tend to take for granted, I know that it is urgent that I take myself into account each day, a task to which I often find upon reflection myself woefully inadequate. I need to work harder. I need to pray and strive to do all I can in pursuits that inch toward the seemingly elusive realization of a just society. The cogent and agonizing cries of our African-American brothers and sisters, no justice, no peace, that we've heard again and again and again and again, now over the past days, echoing in city after city throughout this country, may well be the most crucial refrain of our age. Baha'u'llah, the Lord of the age, the promised one of all religions, the divine physician who, born in Iran, perhaps the darkest corner of the world, just 2 centuries ago, who as a prisoner and in exile for some 40 years revealed thousands of tablets comprising over 100 volumes of writings, since translated into some 800 languages, revealed this very same truth. Here is what he wrote in his hidden words. The light of men is justice. Quench it not with the contrary winds of oppression and tyranny. The purpose of justice is the appearance of unity among men. The ocean of divine wisdom surgeth within this exalted word, while the books of the world cannot contain its inner significance. The purpose of justice, Baha'u'llah writes, is the appearance of unity among men. No justice, no peace. No justice, no peace. Baha'u'llah made it abundantly clear in countless tablets and admonitions that there could be no peace without justice. No justice, no peace. As Baha'is, we understand that we are, just as everyone is, steeped in the challenges of our age. We're often not even aware of the social attitudes that, permeating the very fabric of society, impact each of us, if even on a subconscious level. And paying lip service to these lofty ideals is not enough. This is the day for action. And for me, as a privileged white man, I'm praying for the strength to be quiet and listen, to hear the wisdom of my African-American brothers and sisters whose pain, no matter how much I might try, I can never fully understand. Action, not words, is no less than a requirement of God in this age. About this, Baha'u'llah wrote, quote, "Guidance hath ever been given by words, and now it is given by deeds." Deeds that are pure and holy, for words are the property of all alike, whereas such deeds as these belong only to our loved ones. Strive then with heart and soul to distinguish yourselves by your deeds. You know, I struggled with the use of this quote today because I did not want it to be heard as if we Baha'is think that we are the loved ones of God. How arrogant would that be? Perhaps the loved ones of God today are those from each and every background who are willing to struggle with the very pressing social issues of our times, subduing our own inclinations, doing battle with our ever insistent selves, our egos. For the guidance of Baha'u'llah is this, quote, "The all-knowing physician hath his finger on the pulse of mankind. He perceiveth the disease and prescribeth in his unerring wisdom the remedy. Every age hath its own problem, and every soul its particular aspiration. The remedy the world needeth in its present day afflictions can never be the same as that which a subsequent age may require. Be anxiously concerned with the needs of the age ye live in, and center your deliberations on its exigencies and requirements," he wrote. It is with this in mind that I am most honored to introduce today's special guest, Mr. Eric Dozier. Eric is a musician, a composer, a scholar. He's a cultural activist and music educator who uses music to engage communities in dialogue about racism. He is a graduate of Duke University and Duke Divinity School and is currently pursuing a doctorate at the University of Tasmania, researching Black gospel music performed in multicultural contexts as a pathway to racial justice. Eric sees Black American music as much more than entertainment. It is a social force, a means and modality for social and spiritual transformation. Eric, welcome to Bahai.chat.
Thank you so much. Thank you. It's good to see you, brother.
See, my friend.
It's been a while. It's been a while. Welcome everybody. Hi to all of my friends and loved ones who I see are here today. And I'm so happy to be here on Bahai.chat today, just for myself to be able to process some of the things that you had mentioned, David, in regards to what is happening in the streets of America. And those of us that are Baha'is have heard the warnings year after year, generation after generation. And so even though we know those things, they're always shocking because we are still living in a time where people are not seeing it. And not only that, people are not acting on it. And so I'm just going to jump right in because there's an old saying in my faith community that I grew up in that says spirit does not descend without a song. And let's not sleep on the fact that we're not just wrestling against a political system or a socioeconomic system. Our battle is essentially spiritual. The Bible says that we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities and powers in high places. So if we're not storing up our spiritual resources, then we're not going to be able to win the battle. So with that said, sometimes I feel like a motherless child. Sometimes I feel like a motherless child. Sometimes I feel like a motherless child, a long way from home. A long way from home. Sometimes I feel like I've lost my way. Sometimes I feel like I've lost my way. Sometimes I feel like I've lost my way. A long way from home. A long way from home. Walk with me, Lord. Walk with me. Walk with me, Lord. Walk with me. While I'm on this tedious journey, I want Jesus to walk with me, because he walks with my mother, and he walks with me. I said he walked with my mother, and he walks with me. While I'm on this pilgrim's journey, I want the Master to walk with me. Sometimes I feel like I'm almost gone. Sometimes I feel like I'm almost gone. Sometimes I feel like I'm almost was gone a long way, a long, long, long way, a long way, a long way from home. We were all huddled together in one cell, our feet in stocks, and around our necks fastened the most galling of chains. The air we breathed was laden in the foulest impurities, while the floor on which we sat was covered with filth and infested with vermin. No ray of light was allowed to penetrate the pestilential dungeon or to warm its icy coldness. We were placed in 2 rows, each facing the other. We had taught them to repeat certain verses, which every night they chanted with extreme fervor. God is sufficient unto me. He verily is the all-sufficing. In him let the trusting trust. The chorus of these gladsome voices would continue to peal out until the early hours of morning. Their reverberation would fill the dungeon, and piercing its massive walls would reach the ears of Nasruddin Shah, whose palace was not far distant from the place where we were imprisoned. What means this sound? He was reported to have exclaimed. It is the anthem the Babis are intoning in their prison, they replied. The Shah made no further remarks, nor did he attempt to restrain the enthusiasm the enthusiasm of his prisoners, despite the horrors of their confinement. That is from, I think that book comes from that quote comes from the Revelation of Baha'u'llah. But if you take that first half of the quote, you would think that it could have possibly been a slave narrative. That's what it reminded me of, at least. And so, you know, one of the things that James Baldwin said about the role of the artist, he said that the role of the artist is exactly the same as the role of the lover. If I love you, I have to make you conscious of the things that you don't see. If I love you, I have to make you conscious of the things that you don't see. So as we go further and further into this chat today, I want to tell you all right up front, I love you. And it might possibly sting a little bit. All right. Just so you know. But I wanted to share that particular passage because as I was learning about the Baha'i Faith, I began to make these little connections in my mind to the suffering of Baha'u'llah and the Black experience in America, as I saw it through my own eyes, but also through the music of my folks. And I also began to think about this other passage that says the ancient beauty consented to be bound in chains so that mankind could be released from its bondage. And I couldn't help but to start on a path to connect some of these dots to my own experience and my own music. And I know that, that some of you may have come here to, and you know me as a musician, and to hear me talk about music, and, music being a ladder to the soul, and all of these things that we know as Baha'is from our own scripture. But music for me, and for many Black Americans, has been much more than that. Dr. Bernice Johnson Reagan says that when we sing, we announce our existence. And so when we're singing, we're not just putting ourselves forward to be entertainment for the masses, and we never have done that. When we sing, we announce our existence says to me that every time we open our mouths to make that sound, to bring forth those joyful and sad melodies, that what we're doing is we are engaging in a moment of reconstituting ourselves. And what I mean by that is that we're remaking ourselves in all of those moments when we're repeating that music. So that's what it does for us. Now, there's another aspect of it, and that's the aspect of what it does for other people. Frederick Douglass refers to this in one of his writings when he says that that music for him served to strengthen his hatred of the chattel slavery system, and strengthen the love that he had for his brothers and sisters that were in bonds. But then he goes on to say, I don't know how it affected those that were outside of that circle of the spiritual. However, he says that if you're not moved by that music, there is no flesh on your obdurate heart. Now, our writings talk about that impact that music can have on us and on people. Now, one quote says, lift up your voices and sing out the song of the kingdom. Spread far and wide the precepts and counsels of your loving Lord, so that this world will change into another world. There's also another passage that says, and this is a very familiar passage, it's the first thing that you read when you open the prayer book. It says, intone, O my servant, the verses of God that have been received by thee, as intoned by them who have drawn nigh unto him, that the sweetness of thy melody may kindle thine own soul and attract the hearts of all men. Now, if you go on and read the rest of that passage, it talks about, even though we may remain unaware of its effect, yet the virtue vouchsafed, in these words, not only impact us, but they scatter abroad the fragrances of God, and they impact the environment around us. Now, I contend that that's what our ancestors were doing with their music. So keep in mind that when these folks were being captured and put in bondage, they were not enslaving slaves. They were enslaving people that had built civilizations, that had built extensive cultures of meaning and existence. And so, do you not think that if you take the weapons out of the hands of a general, or you try to tie up the hands of a matriarch or a warrior or a scientist or whoever, that they won't find a way to resist? And that's exactly what they did. You know, we have always believed, and this is something that my grandfather conveyed to me about the music that we were doing. He says that when that music goes out, it doesn't return void. That means that when it goes out and it does work. So our music for us was created to go do work. You know, as Douglas said, if you are not affected by that music, there is no flesh on your obdurate heart. We're even told in our healing prayer, our long healing prayer, that if you're passing by the house where people are praying, that you're still going to be impacted by that, even though you may not know it. So that's how we use music. We understood that principle. You know, so we use music to turn the hearts of people that had hatred in their hearts for us. So that's one thing that we have to that we have to understand here. But I'm giving you these foundations from the Baha'i Faith so that you understand, because, you know, I travel a lot. I do a lot of work with Baha'is, and they say, well, we don't sing. We're not a singing faith. You know, we don't sing like Black folks sing. But when I think about that story that I shared with you, it says that we gave them 2 verses to sing. We were sitting on 2 other sides, and one side was sing, God is sufficient unto me. He verily is the all sufficing. The other side would sing, in him let the trusting trust. In him let the trusting trust. Now, what that sounds like to me is call and response. And if I was a betting man, I would say and state unequivocally that our faith was born in bondage and conceived in the most sacred of songs. So when you say we don't sing, we were born and manifested and drummed up our courage in songs and chants. So it's odd not to sing. Lift up your voices and sing out the song of the kingdom. Spread far and wide the precepts and counsels of the loving Lord, so that this world will change into another world. That's why we sing. We don't sing to be seen. We sing because when we do that, when we take these prayers and when we take these divine words and when we take our heart and we put it on those melodies, it goes out and it does something in the world. Okay? So meanwhile, while Baha'u'llah and the Babis were in this prison, they were singing, God is sufficient unto me. He verily is the all sufficing. In him let the trusting trust. In him let the trusting trust. It says that the sound penetrated the walls and it reached their captor. He said, what means this sound? I mean, I beat him. I cut them. I tried to blow them up. And they're still singing. What means this sound? Now we need to think about that because that sound of those birth pangs of our faith were not just heard by the Shah. Those things began to spread all over the world, and we're told that the sun will rise in the east, and that the product of that sun, the energy of that sun, will be felt in the west. It will begin to manifest, and you know that didn't just start to happen when Baha'is in Europe and America started to take notice of the faith. There were people that had been calling on the blessed beauty for centuries. And so all the way across the ocean, something else was happening. You know, it's no coincidence that the year that Baha'u'llah announced who he was, that that marked the same time of the emancipation of Black people in America. And not only that, something else that Frederick Douglass said about the year 1843, 1844. He said that was the most active time of anti-slavery activity in the country. So something was happening, right? So I want you to think about that because this presentation is not just about music. See, music is a doorway to understanding a group of people. If you want to know what a group of people feel and how they think and their value system, their social theories, their theology. There was a theologian that once said that black people sing their theology. If you want to know what black people believe about God, you have to listen to their music, because that was one of our major ways of communication. And it's not because we couldn't communicate in other ways, but other ways experienced a lot more barriers than the music, because people used to look at us, oh no, they're just out there singing, they happy, they just singing, that's what they're doing. But no, we were creating new worlds with our music. But let me just share something with you about this time of abolition and emancipation that Dr. W.E.B. Du Bois said. And he said this about black religion, okay? And this is from a book called The Souls of Black Folk. And if you haven't read it, I would recommend reading it. This is what he says about black religion in the mid part of the 19th century. He says his religion became darker and more intense, and in his ethics crept a note of revenge into his songs. And here we go with the music, a day of reckoning close at hand. Now, what do we call this day, Baha'is? We call this, if we're looking at the prophetic traditions from the book of Malachi and Isaiah and Micah and, all of these books, we call it the great and terrible day of God. It is the day of reckoning, the day of resurrection, the day of judgment, all of these different things. He says that in his songs crept this note of a day of reckoning being close at hand. The coming of the Lord swept this side of death. Now, these are words coming from Du Bois about the mid part of the 19th century. And it came to be a thing to be hoped for in this day. Through fugitive slaves and irrepressible discussion, this desire for freedom seized the black million still in bondage and became their one ideal of life. The black bards caught new notes and sometimes even dared to sing, "Oh, freedom, oh, freedom, oh, freedom over me. And before I'll be a slave, I'll be buried in my grave and go home to my Lord and be free. No more hatred, no more hatred, no more hatred over me. And before I'll be a slave, I'll be buried in my grave and go home to my Lord and be free." He goes on to say that Negro religion thus transformed itself and identified itself with the dream of abolition until that which was a radical fad in the white North and an anarchistic plot in the white South had become a religion to the black world. And if you know anything about the abolitionist movement, it wasn't just black people fighting for their freedom. Of course, it was grounded in that hope and the dream of that enslaved population. But it was a multicultural, multi-faith movement to set people free. Now, this is the last thing he says in that quote. He says it became the religion of the black world. Thus, when emancipation finally came, I need you to hear this. Thus, when emancipation finally came, it seemed to the freedmen a literal coming of the Lord. Now you hear that. I hope you hear that. You know, I'm used to the feedback that comes from a tradition of call and response. So I don't know if y'all out there with me because I'm not watching the chat or anything like that. But I'm going to read that one more time. Thus, when emancipation finally came, 1862, 1863, it seemed to the freedmen a literal coming of the Lord. Now, I don't believe that is coincidence. I believe that those people saw something. I believe that they knew something in their spirit at that time. They knew that it was time, and they knew that it was imminent, and they knew that it was going to happen because it is who they are. It is in us to see. Baha'u'llah, I'm going to share this quote with you just to tell you what I mean. Baha'u'llah, Abdul Baha, moreover, has said, once compared the colored people to the black pupil of the eye surrounded by the white. In this black pupil is seen the reflection of that which is before it, and through it the light of the Spirit shineth forth. Now that's from Shoghi Effendi, Advent of Divine Justice. Now here's another one. Thou art like unto the pupil of the eye, which is dark in color, yet it is the fount of light and the revealer of the contingent world. Now don't think, now, I always tell people, Baha'u'llah did not make black people the pupil of the eye. He observed the function of black people on the planet, and he made it clear what that function was to be in relation to the rest of humanity. I hope y'all are with me here. You know, because a lot of times, like, we use that metaphor as, you know, and we think about that function. We think more about the form than the function. You know, we want to get in the pictures. We want to have these multicultural pictures and show that we got all these folks in our community. But I want to ask you at this, you know, just for a moment to reflect on the function of the pupil of the eye. Okay? Because we have to move beyond just the form. Because it's not just a good thing to reflect on the fact that you have eyes, but you have to reflect on the fact of what those eyes do for you. And I believe that if we understood that essential function that the eyes play for the body, we would not be choking black people in the street. We would not be shooting them in the back. Because we would realize that when we do that, it's like us putting our own eyes out. Now, if you don't believe me, Du Bois wrote an essay called The Souls of White Folk. He says the method which we black people evolved for opposing slavery and fighting prejudice are not to be forgotten, but learned for our own and others' instructions. The function of the pupil of the eye is to provide sight to the body of humanity. Howard Zinn was the historian of the civil rights movement. Spent a lot of time with the freedom singers, and y'all know these songs. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine, let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. Ain't gonna let nobody turn me around, turn me around, turn me around. Ain't gonna let nobody turn me around. I'm gonna keep on walking, keep on talking, marching on the freedom land. So you think about those freedom songs. When you start to think about those freedom songs, I'm gonna ask you to kind of broaden your scope a little bit. One scholar said you have to expand your frame, because right now when we sing songs like Little Light of Mine and these little things, they've been relegated to the station of kind of children's music. That's old music. We don't need that music anymore. That's from an old era, an old time. But, you know, the thing is if you think about somebody singing This Little Light of Mine in a country or in a context where everybody is trying to put your light out, then that song means a different thing. Or when you hear Ain't Gonna Let Nobody Turn Me Around, keep on walking, keep on talking, marching on the freedom land. My grandfather used to tell me that we sing to get our courage up. That's what we do. You know, Baha'u'llah said to say, intone the verses of God that have been received by thee, as intoned by them who have drawn nigh. You know, and so, you know, that the sweetness of the melody may kindle my own soul and attract the hearts of all men. So kindling my soul and attracting the hearts of all men. Here we go with that. When we sing, we announce our existence. All of these things that undergird the process of music making in Black America. But also, as I said, music has been a way that we make ourselves known, but we also make you known to yourself, who you are. I'll give you another example. When they sung, I've got shoes, you got shoes, all of God's children got shoes. When I get to heaven, gonna put on my shoes, I'm gonna shout all over God's heaven, heaven, heaven. Everybody talking about heaven, ain't going there, heaven, heaven. I'm gonna shout all over God's heaven. I don't know if you caught that or not, but there's a little bit of theology in there. There's a whole critique of American Christianity in that song in one line. Here you hear people proclaiming the gospel of the oneness of humanity, and then they just slip a little something in there. They say, everybody talking about heaven ain't going. Now, why would they slip that in there? They slipped that in there because one of the major ways that they were being oppressed was through American religion. People talking about heaven every day and beating and dehumanizing them every night. Everybody talking about heaven ain't going. Didn't I say Black people sing their theology? But they also make the society known to you. So if you're not listening to those things, if you're not listening for those things, if you are ignoring what Black people have been saying about their particular experience through their music, through their art, through their writings, then you don't see. This is what Howard Zinn said about that. He said, it is one of the conditions of effective psychotherapy that the patient must begin to see himself as he really is. And the United States, now forced by the young Negro to see itself through his eyes, an ironic reversal, for the Negro was always compelled to see himself through the eyes of the white man, is coming closer to a realistic appraisal of its national personality. America can't understand itself unless it sees itself through the eyes of Black people. That is what the pupil of the eye is in function, beyond its form. And you hear that in the music. You hear that in these calls, you know, for justice. You hear it in these calls and these longings for the oneness of humanity in songs like, he's got the whole world in his hands, he's got the whole world in his hands, he's got the whole world in his hands, he's got the whole world in his hands. Now, if that's not a call for the oneness of humanity, I don't know what is. And then they went on to say, he's got you and me, brother. And they're not talking to just their black brothers and sisters. They're talking to those very people that had put them in those chains. In his hands, he's got you and me, sister. In his hands, he's got everybody here. In his hands, he's got the whole world in his hands. So we have to understand that music grows out of an essential function and purpose that black people that have sat on the margins of the family of humanity, are destined to play. That's what that music grows out of, and we're not to make it wings to self and passion. We are to understand it for what it is, and understand that when Baha'u'llah refers to these people as the pupil of the eye, he's talking about an essential function that they play for the human family. We can't keep gouging our eyes out, people. There's so much that I could say, but I'm going to wrap this up. I'm going to leave you with a couple of things, and of course, I'm going to leave you with a song. This is what John Oliver Killen said about these cultural structures of black people. And he was referring to the music and the art, because he said that we need a cultural revolution in our country. What we're seeing is not just something that is relegated to the realm of law enforcement or politics or economics. What we're seeing is a culture really, 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 for some of you, beginning to show you who it is or what it is. It is a culture. It is a way of being that we have been caught up in. Cornel West calls it America's own special version of the absurd. This white supremacy, this racism that is intent on snuffing out anybody but a small set of humanity, subset of humanity on the planet. Killen says, we artists must create a new dialogue, and it is left up to us, to the writer, the artist, to create this vision, not the politician, not the diplomat or the statesman. Yes, in a fundamental sense, only a cultural revolution can save our country at this moment of great crisis. A revolution that will unbrainwash the entire American people, for we have all of us been the victims of a mighty brainwash that has continued unabated for the last 500 years. It is my contention that if you really want to be effective and understand what is happening in this country, you have to center certain perspectives. When I think about this music, I always tell people it is a doorway. It's a doorway to the knowledge of the people. That's why I do it. Because I want people to see the noble contribution that Black Americans and people of African descent have contributed to the evolution of culture on the planet. That's why I do the music. I don't do it to be a superstar or anything like that. I do it in hopes that it be useful to opening people's eyes up to what Black people are experiencing, and that they understand what Black people are experiencing through the eyes of Black people. But that they understand the function of Black people that they have played in projecting a vision for the world that says all of God's children got shoes. He's got the whole world in his hands, not not just a handful of people, but everybody. All of those things. So I'm going to leave you with, I'm not going to leave you because we got Q&A, but I want to share with you a song that I wrote called Cotton and the Cross, because we're talking about this intersection between religion and music and culture and racism. And I wrote this song because I wanted to write a love letter to my folks. You know, because we are tied, you know, as Dr. King says, we are bound up in a inextricable web of mutuality. Baha'u'llah says, know ye not why we created you all from the same dust, so that no one would exalt themselves over the other. Ponder at all time in your heart how you were created. And he says that if you understand this, you will understand why it behooves you to walk with the same feet, eat with the same mouth, and dwell in the same land. That's what oneness is. And this music has always captured that spirit from the very, very beginning. You know, as our dear sister Maya Angelou said that, you know, we are the hope and dream of the slave. When you hear that music, you hear their hopes and dreams, and you know that that's what they were hoping for. They were hoping for this world, for these people, for all of us to come together and acknowledge this. And who better to teach you about injustice than someone who has been on the underside of it? So here we go. Cotton and the Cross. And me and you together, Southern born, Southern bred, but still far apart, bound in blood and sacred song, still we don't see each other, 'cause we're living neath the shadow of cotton and the cross. Mansions high and cabins low and indigo, scars and stripes, a paradise for some and not all. For God and faith we separate, with our backs to the sun, 'cause we're living neath the shadow of cotton and the cross. Hard rains coming, roll on Jordan, wash away all our sins. Old world's dying, new world's rising. One of these old days, these bones are gonna rise again. Oh, oh, mistake what I say as a judgment. In the purest sense, it represents my cry from the heart. We can't let fate steal our day. We all flow through each other. Though we're living neath the shadow, don't be driven by the shadow. Get delivered from the shadow of cotton and the cross.
Eric, that was extraordinary. And I know, one of the problems with a webinar is that you can't really see folks' reaction, but I have a special device, and I just have to tell you, everyone in their virtual spaces were giving you a standing ovation.
Oh.
And it's wonderful. We have questions.
Yes.
And I think let's not take a pause. Let's just go right ahead. Let's not worry about the clock. This is just such an engaging conversation. Josefina, I don't know if you are able, it would be nice if you would bring the questioners on so they can ask their question, and or Anissa, you can put the question, but let's see them and make it a little bit more personal if you can do that. So I leave it with you, and Anissa, it's with you.
Okay. Eric, thank you so much for sharing all of this with us. I know I myself have just felt sort of this sense of a spiritual and emotional kind of overwhelming sense of chaos and tension, and this was such a beautiful kind of way of addressing some of that. So we had a bunch of questions come in, a lot of praise, a lot of curiosity about where can we find this afterwards. Is it being recorded? Yes, it's being recorded. It's on Facebook. It's going to be on YouTube. You can follow us on Instagram and see all the things that we're putting out. But we had one quite striking question was about how you identify both your Blackness and your Baha'i-ness harmoniously. And kind of where you see this sort of distinction that the revelation of Baha'u'llah offers in finding solutions towards racial justice.
Let's see. Can you ask that again? I'm trying to understand kind of the nature of that.
Sure.
question.
So how do you identify with both your Blackness and your Baha'i-ness in a harmonious way?
Yeah. I mean, I don't compartmentalize my identity. Mm-hmm. Baha'u'llah said enough wonderful, glorious things about Black folk that I saw myself in the faith, and I think that one of the problems that we have is we suffer from the notion of a divided self, and then also when we, when I describe things as Black, Black is a very loaded term, and it's also a it's a legal term, and it's always been a term that has been used to describe the legal status of people, who has rights in this country and who hasn't. And so what I think for me as a Baha'i, what Baha'u'llah has done is he, for me, it's kind of helped me see my own spiritual destiny in a broader context. Because Baha'u'llah doesn't ask us to come into the faith and not be who we are. That's what America asks us to do. And anybody that comes from an immigrant population, whether they admit it or not, know that when you come here, you got to take a side. You just do, and you've always had to. And it's not, and there's pressure to do so. The pressure used to be a lot more violent, but I mean, you look at how this country treats Black people, and a lot of people are like, well, maybe we shouldn't be hanging out with them because maybe we'll get hurt. So people are not dumb. People understand what's happening, even though they may or may not admit it. But I don't see any kind of conflict in me being who I am and me being a Baha'i, because I always grew up learning about justice. Justice was something that was encased in my culture. I learned about love. I learned about the oneness of humanity. I learned about my own nobility, and I learned about that stuff before I became a Baha'i. And it was because of those Christian relatives that instilled a broader vision of humanity in me that I was able to recognize those Black Christian folks. So I'm not taking anything away from my identity as being a I don't know, Black person or person with brown skin, whatever you want to call it, in this country, because my folks have built structures that have consistently called this country and the world to be a better place. So I don't dismiss that to become a Baha'i. Now, of course, there are certain things that we do have to let go, but I did not have to let go of that. I mean, that's why, when you think about the language, Shoghi Effendi uses, refers to the colored people or, Black people and their function in the world. We don't say everybody has to be the same color. Our notion of diversity is vibrant and vibrant interaction of the different elements of the human family, because we all have gifts to bring. White supremacy makes you suppress all of those gifts in submission to one skin color or to one notion. The Baha'i Faith does not do that, and that's why, I don't have to reconcile being who I am with being a Baha'i. The Baha'i Faith is to release all of the balanced potentiality of humankind. That means that we bring our histories, we bring our struggles and our victories all together, and we use that, because from those struggles, what you have is people that have garnered a lot of information about what it means to resist oppression, what it means to combat prejudice, and all of that stuff. They've done a lot of the work. And I always tell people the shortest, as we know, the shortest distance between 2 points is a straight line. We've been going around all in curves and circles trying to figure things out. When you probably have resources living in your neighborhood, in your community right now, that can help you get to where you need to get through faster. And so I try to help people relate to that by comparing that to the equality of women and men. If I want to understand if I'm being okay as far as being a man in this world, I don't ask my dude friends. I ask my wife and I ask my daughters, because they know they can help me get there faster. So it's the same thing. If you want to understand how you're going to move to this prejudice and move to action, you need to consult with the people who have been fighting it the longest, because they understand the nature of the beast. That's what the function of the pupil of the eye is. And I see myself in that when I come into the Baha'i Faith. So it's not a compromise, a choice, or anything like that. I don't feel divided in any way.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
We had another question asking, how do you understand or explain the collective, exemplary, and miraculous patience and sustained spirituality and palpable love for humanity of the North American Black community?
Well, people, you know, a lot of times when I do these workshops, particularly I do a workshop called Praise, Protest, and Purpose, which is a survey of Black American gospel music. And I do them all over the world. And inevitably that question comes up. It comes up in this form. How in the world are Black folks still able to manifest any hope, any love, any patience with folks? And, you know, my thing is that I look at these cultures on the planet. You know, Western civilization is a baby, and Western civilization is like right now in its adolescence, and they're acting like a spoiled teenager. And it's manifesting itself in the culture. You know, I think when you start to think about the Black and brown people on the planet, you know, we collectively have witnessed the rise and fall of many civilizations, the Mayans, the Aztecs, the Egyptians, the Romans. You know, we've seen it happen. And I believe that the reason why you may see, and it's not, you know, we have to be sure that we don't characterize that stuff as passivity. You know, I think what we have to understand is that when you're talking about people resisting, resisting an oppressive system, different things like that, we have to broaden our notions of what we think protest is. You know, so protest, is not just somebody grabbing a sign and walking out to the street and going down to the State House and saying, give me my rights, give me my rights, give me my rights. You know, there were many ways that we resisted. You know, we resisted with our music. We resisted with our art. We resisted by teaching our children that they have a light inside of them. So there are so many other ways that that we're protesting. So I just don't want people to characterize Black folks that are not walking around with signs and different things like that as being passive in regards to the oppression and things. Cornel West says that we built cultural structures and institutions to stave back America's particular version of the absurd. And so protest looks like the Black church. Protest, looks like cooperative economics and self-determination. Protest might look like Black people saying, I'm going to go in my house right now, I'm going to meditate, and I'm going to store up my internal resources, and then when I come out, we're going to deal with this. You know, self-care can be protest, because there's nothing really in this society that is designed to take care of us. So when I take that time and somebody calls, well, can you do this? Can you do this? Can you help me? Can you, do you have a book reference? Can you do it? And I say, no, I can't do that today. You need to Google that. I'm taking care of myself. That's protest, And so I think that what we have to do is kind of expand our notion of what that is, and don't, and not characterize, protest as one kind of way. We have to expand our notion of that. And that's what Black people have had to do, just because if you can't pass this information through literature or books, we couldn't be out with pamphlets, during slavery and all of these different things. The way we carried messages from plantation to plantation was because was through what emerged for us as the grapevine. Now, a lot of y'all heard the song by Marvin Gaye, I Heard It Through the Grapevine. But what that was is that was a network of communication. And it emerged from the fact that there were musicians that were being sent to different plantations during this time. They were the ones that had a little bit more freedom to travel. And the slave owners would contract them out, and they would take messages to different plantations. This is what's going to be happening here. This is what's happening there. So there was an emergence of a network there, and it was through the artists, through the musicians. Okay.
I wanted to really quickly, just in case there are because we're running a little over time, and we want to do that because there's so much interest. So we're sticking by. But I wanted to quickly just share with people, if you're interested in staying in touch with Bahai.chat, you can find us on Facebook, on Instagram, and on YouTube. And you can also email us at info@Bahai.chat if you have any questions. And especially want to point out our guide program. So if you are interested in learning more about the Baha'i Faith, you can send us an email and put the word guide in the subject line, and we will follow up with you to get in touch, answer questions, offer resources. And so I just wanted to quickly make that announcement because I don't want to stop the Q&A. But I also see that we have some people who are using the hand raise function. And I want to bring them on to see their faces.
Yes, I'd love to see some faces.
So we have a few people who have done this, and I'm promoting these folks to panelists so they're able to actually speak.
Hi.
Hi.
Hello.
So Mariah, Chantel, and George, you guys had raised your hand. I see there are more people who are raising their hand now, but maybe I'll let you guys just answer your question or ask your questions to Eric first.
Okay. So I'll start. Hi, Eric. It's nice to see you here and meet you. And I really enjoyed everything that you said, and your songs were moving me. I was over here tearing up. I was over here just feeling everything you were saying. And being an African-American woman in today's society is a struggle, as you know, it is being a man. So me being a part of the youth, I'm 25 years old. I wanted to know more specifically how, or if you could give advice to me, how we could do better. I see this violence in the streets, and you sort of answered it when you said about protesting could also be self-care, could be meditation. That spoke to me because that's what I'm doing. I'm trying to hone all of this energy. I'm writing in my journal every day. I'm posting things on Facebook. But how can we do better? How can the youth, African Americans, use their tools, use their education to do more, to show the people that we are more than they are portraying us to be?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think that one of the things that you can do and continue to do, and I've seen this a lot on Instagram, I've seen this a lot on Facebook and social media, where you have a lot of young Black Americans that are focusing on teaching and sharing knowledge that has been kind of kept away from us. So the pursuit of knowledge. Another one, there's a lot of discussion about self-determination, building alternative economic systems and different things like that so that we can sustain ourselves accordingly. And, you know, what's funny about it, and I know that once, you know, when people start hearing that we're building these different systems and blah, 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 people are going to be like, oh, well, you know, you're segregating, you're promoting segregation or whatever. And I always tell folks is that, you know, when integration happened one way. It was Black moving into white spaces that were inherently unsafe, that have never been safe for us. And so, you know, there's another direction that integration could happen, you know? And so I think Black folks need to learn how to grow some food. I think that one of the things that this pandemic has done is that it has made us pay a lot more closer attention to our children's education. Right now, the American public school system suspends Black kids at 5 to 6 times the rate as it does white kids in the same infraction. I think we need to be educating our kids in a system that nurtures, encourages, and safeguards them. So, yeah, I mean, it really is a cultural revolution. It's a spiritual revolution. We need to teach our kids how to meditate, teach them how to pray, teach them how to take care of themselves so that they know how to combat a lot of this propaganda that is out about Black people. Like I was watching a thing this morning where the way they portrayed these things that are happening in Minnesota, and the way they've always portrayed Black unrest. They call us thugs. They call us all these different things. But a white dude can actually take a, semi-automatic rifle right to the state house, and he becomes a hero. And so we can't wait until our kids are 16, 17, 18, 19 years old to start talking to them about this. My mother had these conversations with me right when I started driving. Listen, police pull you over, put your hands up here, and here I am, little Black boy, I'm not even really thinking about that, but my mom and folks, so I think that what we have to look at is we have to look at addressing it through culture, not just, sporadic protests that protest the economic system or the political system and things. The other thing about white supremacy is that it is by nature narcissistic. And it likes to be seen, it likes to be acknowledged, and it likes to be, and whether that is a negative thing against it or something that outright supports it, any energy that it gets, it causes it to expand. And I think the best way to probably deal with, I've been telling my friends that they need to, and I'll tell you all a story. Think about it this way. You ever been out, when you were living with your folks, and you did something that you weren't supposed to do, and you came home and your mom or your dad were just like sitting in a chair and they didn't say nothing to you? They just looking at you, and you're like, uh-oh, they have to know. They have to know. I think Black folks should just chill for about 30 days, go in, get themselves together, don't talk to nobody, and let people kind of deal with the fact that, okay, we're going to try a different method. Because I believe that sometimes, like white supremacy thrives on conflict. It likes that, likes to see you fighting it. That gives it energy. But there are other ways that we deal. And at the top of this conversation, I mentioned that we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities and powers in high places. Our battle is essentially spiritual. If we haven't stored up our spiritual resource, we can't fight what we need to fight, and we can't fight how we need to fight. So I'm definitely an advocate of, meditation, reflection, and then action, not just action, because action by itself will destroy. You got to reflect on what you were doing. So that would be my advice to the young folks, and just keep on doing what you're doing. You got tools that, how old is YouTube? 15 years old? Like I remember when there was no YouTube, no MP3s, and I'm that old, like I'm 50. And now you have access to so many different things, but you need a plan and you need focus, and just start with a handful of folks, and invite people in whose hearts are there with you. I hope that helps.
Shelby, do you want to ask your question now?
Uh-huh.
Yeah. So hi, Eric.
Hi, how are you?
I'm good, and I see that you're doing well as well.
We're doing well. We're doing well.
Yeah. I wanted to thank you for coming on and talking to all of us. So many times while you were talking, I was sitting here like, this guy is taking us to church. Like I just felt so much truth in what you were saying, and it moved me. But I also wanted to get your opinion on the role of contemporary Black American music. And you mentioned that you mentioned a quote saying that, the country has been brainwashed. So what role do you see contemporary Black music playing in the unbrainwashing of America and then the world?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think, like even if you look at, and I do kind of, when I get to expand the presentation, I actually talk about a little bit more about contemporary music, starting with like a history of hip hop, because, when all of that, when hip hop started, it started among the poor and disenfranchised in the Bronx. And, up in those areas in New York City. And one of the things that it did is it actually was formed so that the gangs would compete through dance and culture and art and different things like that, instead of killing each other. And hip hop originally had stopped a lot of that nonsense until the record companies got a hold to it. And that's what happens when we haven't found adequate ways to protect our art from being co-opted. Because once it's co-opted, it becomes a tool of the society. So all of a sudden, when you got people, talking about liberated women, no more gun violence, being very honest about the conditions in their community, all these different things. And all of a sudden the themes turn to violence, sex, drugs, all these different things. That's not what hip hop was before. That's what hip hop became after record companies got a hold to it and started enticing artists with all of these big dreams and promises. And so, I think that, there are those now that are well, I don't think the tradition has ever died. I think a lot of that hip hop went underground, with, KRS-One is still performing, I think Public Enemy and Chuck D and a lot of them have some new music coming out. And then, you have, you do have some more contemporary artists that are talking about those things now and I think that has happened because of these new possibilities that technology has opened up, where artists don't have to be tied to labels, where they can actually honestly do their art and fund it through these different, other independent means. I think that has facilitated this reemergence of folks really beginning to use their art to speak to this truth, but also, folks being able to have some independence as to how they sustain themselves with their craft. But I think that there's certainly a role, art, dance, music, all these different things. Like as Killen said, we need a cultural revolution. And what the arts are, actually are the flowers of a value system. So when you think about the spirituals and it's, like even when you think about, let's think about contemporary music, let's think about genres for a minute. If I grew up in rural Southeast Tennessee and people were playing banjos and guitars and stuff like this, and I grew up in that, and then I started playing banjos and guitars, and then people say, well, why are you playing white music? It's not really white music. It's my music. And I think that even when we start to think as music as genres and different things like that, because even genres were used to separate people racially. It was called race music, all these different things. And so like, if we like, I think of music as a long lineage of emerging expression that takes on various forms. So for instance, if I'm singing, we've got the whole world in our hands, that sentiment is still, that sentiment came back to life for us, throughout time. Like Black music is really also a theory. Like, I don't think we have a lot of those hard separations, like the contemporary and it all kind of swirls around in there today. And you do see examples of that in hip hop. Like, think about how the early hip hop artists made their music. They used sampling. They didn't dismiss the past. They actually used it and actually archived the past in their contemporary music. So it's a different theory, a different way of thinking about music. So I think that when you think about the contemporary music and the new artists that are emerging, I love, like, who do I listen to that's contemporary? I don't listen to as much music as you might think that I would listen to because I'm always hearing it in my head. So, but you know, I like female artists, India Ari, Erica Badu, you know, and there are others, but like you can't separate an artist like that from Billie Holiday or Mahalia Jackson or those other female artists. And I even think that like that even speaks to the concept of time. You know, different cultures have concepts of time, how the past and the present interact. And I think that when we start to think about why we are seeing an emergence of contemporary artists with a lot more freedom talking about substantial things, you know, I think that they're very, very much so heavily connected to the past, you know. And so I try to look at emerging bodies of work like that. And I think that we'll start to see more of that. Like, I mean, think about spoken word artists that are doing these things now. It's just phenomenal. You know, you see the emergence of Black poetry again, you know, like and it's powerful. So I hope that kind of speaks to it. But yeah, I do a little section in a lot of my workshops on contemporary music and particularly hip hop and things like that. So I'm always on the outlook for things like that.
Thank you. In the interest of time, I think we have time for one more. So I'll turn it over to Lee now to ask a question.
Hey, how you doing, folks?
Hey.
Can you hear me okay?
Oh, we doing it.
Good to meet you, brother. My name is Lee Calhoun. I'm not a Baha'i as of yet. I was invited into the chat today by a good friend of mine who is a Baha'i.
I see Brother Bob on your wall too in the back.
Oh yeah. I too am a musician. I used to play in churches, you know, back when I was growing up in Brooklyn. But
wonderful.
What I wanted to say was, I know we talked about you know, girding ourselves and being strong, but the one thing that really touched me about that whole incident with that brother that got choked out was that during that whole process, yes, people filmed, and I understand, you know, a lot of fear in the Black community. Nobody wants to get involved. But the thing that struck me the most was that all of filming that everybody did, nobody jumped in. Nobody, you know, and I understand nobody wants to get arrested. But I'm thinking if it was my son, because I have a son, if it was my son standing there getting choked out, I would have done something. I would have tackled the guy. Maybe they would have choked me out too. But it seems like that's the only, we talk about the spiritual aspect, but we don't think about the physical aspect, because part of it is flesh and blood that we wrestle against.
Yeah.
You know, and there's a verse that says somewhere, or not a verse, I think a tradition, I think it was maybe Prophet Muhammad said, none of you truly believes until you want for your brother what you want for yourself.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
And I know if it was my son or my brother, or even like you said, as just a fellow human being, when do we get to the point where, and I know maybe I'm a big guy, you know, maybe I'm a quite bigger than the average person, but I think we do have to think about actually putting hands on sometimes for justice, you know, because if I was thinking about myself, if I was there and I could have jumped in, maybe that brother wouldn't have got choked out. Maybe it would have been better. At least they would have got their knees on. But my point is, what in the Baha'i Faith, what do you believe about that aspect of actually doing something? Like, what if you were there? What if we were there?
Yeah. You know what? I will find the exact quote, but I know that if we are standing in the defense of someone else, then, you know, that we are allowed to do that. You know, and I think that I'll find the specific quote, because I don't want to really deal in hearsay with you, but I will share with you this. And I think that you're absolutely right. You're asking the right question. Like, what would you do if that was your son, or if that was your brother, if that was your uncle?
Mother,
you know,
your father, anybody.
Yeah, totally. You know, and one of the things that Abdul Baha said, he says, do not be satisfied until each one with whom you are concerned is to you as a member of your family. Regard each one either as a father or as a brother or as a sister or as a mother or as a child. If you can attain to this, your difficulties will vanish and you will know what to do. And I think that if we're not motivated and really, because see, you know, we always say this, and I'm sure that if you've been hanging out with Baha'is, you've heard this too. You know, a lot of talk about one human family and we're all kinfolk, we're all, you know, whatever. The thing is that, you know, if, you know, like I think about the fact that, you know, and I mentioned something earlier, you got 5 to 6 times the rate of suspension happening in our schools right now, happening to black kids every day. Now, if just a quarter of America considered those black kids to be their kids, that wouldn't be happening.
Exactly.
You know, and I think that you're absolutely right. That's how we have to think about these things. You know, you know, when you say that, I always think about this scene from this movie, A Time to Kill, right? Where Samuel Jackson is on trial and Matthew McConaughey is his lawyer. Matthew McConaughey is like, oh, you know, well, why'd you hire me? He said, I hired you because you think just like them. He said, that's the way I want you to be. And at the end, he said, he describes what happens to Samuel Jackson's daughter. He has the jury close their eyes. And then he says, imagine if she was white.
Your daughter, right, exactly.
If she was your daughter. And I think that if we really, really loved each other like that, those things wouldn't be happening.
Exactly.
They wouldn't be happening. Exactly. And so now I don't know what the exact solution would be, but it has to be motivated by a love that actually is that moves us to that. I remember reading something by Frederick Douglass one time, and he was talking about the abolitionists because that was hard for him. It was hard for him to work with white folk because there were some that still, you know, treated him as less than. And he said they were riding on a ferry one day up north, and it was cold. And even up there, the black people had to sleep on the top of the ship. They had to sleep on the deck, and the white people could take their comfortable berths in the bottom. He said that he never faulted his abolitionist brothers who chose to sleep in the bottom of the ship. But he said, nevertheless, I always felt closer to the ones that were willing to share my hardship with me.
Like John Brown.
Exactly, because some of them would sleep up there with him in the cold. And if you are not willing to sleep with black folk in the cold, then you know, don't just call us brother, sister, you know, because that's the type of love that Abdul Baha wants us to have for one another, where we don't make this distinction that if we need to, go ahead, brother.
Right now, we just preaching to the choir because we all here. Obviously, we all in the same way.
We all care, right?
Right, and I'll just say one quick final thing, just a little anecdote. I had an uncle growing up who stayed in the street. He was a rough, you know, kind of a rough character, was in and out of jail. But one thing that brother had, my uncle had, was a love for his people. And I remember he had went out to lunch one day from the job. He had closed up the office because he was a custodian. And on his way either back or to lunch, he saw the police harassing this lady in the street. It was a sister in the street. And I don't know what it was they would, you know, whatever. But my uncle was the type of person that he wouldn't let that go by. He would, you know, he actually stepped in and was, you know, loud mouthing and, you know, get off of her. And they said, well, if you don't shut up, we're going to lock you up. And he didn't care. And he got locked up. So, you know, that's my point. We have to get to the point of not just praying. Prayer is good. But we gotta have action too. And that's when I look at my uncle, he's like a ancestor that I look at. He passed away back in 2002. God bless him. But that's the tradition I came from, and that's how I feel, man.
Brother, I found that letter, and I will make sure that I send it to Anissa and send it to you, because there is actually guidance from our faith on self-defense, and it is it's really good. You know, so I'll make sure that gets to Anissa, and Anissa, can you make sure that gets to Lee? All right, brother.
Thank you, brother.
God bless you, man.
Yeah, definitely. Lee, if you send us an email at info@Bahai.chat, we'll definitely forward what Eric sends over.
All right.
And just in the interest of time, I think maybe we can wrap up now. I want to thank everybody who joined us on Zoom and on Facebook, everyone who gave messages of praise and support, everybody who asked questions.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you especially to Eric for offering not just wisdom and insight, but also song and beauty. Because we all, I think, need moments of beauty.
Yes.
And yeah, I just encourage people to share what we heard today, to keep sort of standing in solidarity, keep learning. I think learning for ourselves is always such a key thing. You can subscribe to the Bahai.chat newsletter to find out about our future programs. Next week's session, we're going to be hearing more about the community building process that's happening across the world. Yeah, I don't know, David, if you have additional announcements that you'd like to share.
I actually just wanted to voice my gratitude to you as well, Eric. It's been an amazing program, an eye-opening program. I hope that you will come back. And I wanted to say as well that if we weren't in virtual space, we'd be demanding an encore. And you hear it. I mean, I wonder if we could depart with an encore.
Okay, I could. Yeah, I'll leave y'all with something. Okay, let's see. I'll leave you with a little chorus of something from maybe Stevie Wonder, perhaps. Good morning or evening, friends. Here's your friendly announcer. I have serious news to pass on to everybody. What I'm about to say could mean the world's disaster, could change your joy and laughter into tears and pain. It's that love's in need of a love today. Yours in the right away. Hate's going round, breaking many hearts. Stop it, please, before it's gone too far. Love's in need of love.
Wow. Thank you. An enriching program. Thank you to all for attending. And just take a minute, Anissa, tell us about next week. You got another great program for next week.
Yeah, so next week we are going to be hearing from Nwandi Lawson.
Oh, wonderful.
And she's going to be facilitating a session called Weaving a Rich Tapestry of Community Life. She currently serves on the Continental Board of Counselors for the Americas, which is an institution focused on promoting education and channeling individual and collective endeavor into community advancement. So she is someone with a lot of experience in this and is going to be joined also by some people who are not Baha'is who are intimately engaged in this process to hear more about the impact of grassroots community action on sort of creating this more spiritual and unified society. Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that. Thank you all for coming.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.